You were never the woman I wanted." Nathan Caldwell said those words in front of 40 people, his hand resting on another woman's waist, his wedding ring still on his finger, and his wife standing 3 feet away, holding a bouquet of white roses she had arranged herself that morning. Sophia Bennett did not scream. She did not beg. She set the roses on the nearest table, pulled the diamond ring from her finger, placed it beside them, and walked straight out the door without looking back. She had no idea that the most dangerous man in New York had watched every second of it. If this story already has your heart pounding, subscribe to our channel right now and follow every part to the very end. Drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. 7 years. That was how long Sophia Bennett had been Nathan Caldwell's wife, his anchor and the invisible engine behind every success he claimed as his own. 7 years of early mornings and late nights. 7 years of swallowing her opinions when his pride couldn't handle them. 7 years of telling herself that love required patience, that good marriages went through difficult seasons, that the man she married was still somewhere inside the man he had become. She had believed that for a very long time. She stopped believing it the night he walked into Marchetti's with Victoria Lane on his arm and a smile on his face that told her he had been planning this moment for weeks. The day had started quietly. Sophia had woken before sunrise. She spent an hour getting ready, not because she was vain, but because she wanted tonight to matter. She had chosen the navy blue dress Nathan told her she looked stunning in the year they got engaged. She had arranged her hair the way he used to reach over and touch during their first years together. She had written a card, an actual handwritten card 4 sentences long, because she believed words meant something when you put effort into them. She had made a reservation at Marchetti's 3 weeks in advance, a private table near the window. Their song requested to play at 7:30. A bottle of the Bordeaux Nathan had mentioned once during a dinner party 2 years ago, the one he said he'd always wanted to try. She had remembered that. She had written it down. She had tracked it down through 2 different wine merchants and had it waiting at the table. That was the kind of woman Sophia was. The kind who remembered what her husband said he wanted, even when he had long since stopped asking what she needed. Her closest friend Diana Walsh had called her at noon. "Are you sure about tonight?" Diana asked. Her voice carried the hesitation of someone who knew too much and wasn't sure how much to say. "I'm sure," Sophia told her. "I just need one real evening. That's all I'm asking for." "Sophia, don't." Her voice was quiet, firm, not angry at Diana, just tired of the conversations that started with her name said that way. "I know what you're going to say. I've heard it. I just need to try." Diana was silent for a long moment. Then, "Whatever happens tonight, you call me. You promise me that." "I promise." She had no idea what she was promising to call about. She arrived at Marchetti's at 6:45. The maitre d' recognized her immediately. She had become a regular over the years: company dinners, client lunches, private celebrations that were always Sophia's doing and always attributed to Nathan's charm. He showed her to the table. She sat. She ordered sparkling water and waited. At 7 she checked her phone. Nothing. At 7:15 she smoothed the napkin across her lap and told herself that traffic in Manhattan was unpredictable. At 7:30 her song began playing softly from the speakers near the bar, exactly as she had arranged. And the table next to her couple leaned in close, and the woman laughed at something private, and Sophia looked at the empty chair across from her, and felt the first cold thread of certainty beginning to pull through her chest. At 7:42 the front door opened. She looked up, and the world as she had known it for 7 years collapsed in the space of about 4 seconds. Nathan walked in wearing the charcoal suit she had picked out for him for his company's winter gala. He had gotten his hair cut recently. He looked well-rested and confident and completely at ease, the way a man looks when he is exactly where he wants to be. The woman beside him was 28 years old. Sophia would learn her exact age later, but she already knew who Victoria Lane was. Everyone in their social circle knew Victoria Lane. She appeared at the same galas and charity events and restaurant openings that Sophia had attended for years, always slightly too close to the powerful men in the room, always dressed to be noticed, always laughing a little too warmly at things that weren't that funny. Nathan had his hand on the small of Victoria's back. Not her shoulder, not her arm, the small of her back. The intimate place. The place that communicated possession and comfort and familiarity in a single gesture. Sophia watched her husband guide another woman through the restaurant she had reserved for their anniversary dinner, and for one completely irrational moment, she thought he doesn't realize where he is. He forgot. He got confused. There's an explanation. Then Nathan's eyes found her. He didn't flinch. He didn't stop walking. He guided Victoria straight to the table Sophia had reserved, pulled out the chair across from his wife, and waited while Victoria sat down. Then he sat beside her, not across from Sophia beside Victoria, so that the two of them were on one side, and Sophia was alone on the other. And he looked at his wife of 7 years across the white tablecloth, and the wine she had tracked down from 2 different merchants, and the card she had written by hand, and he said, "I'm glad you're already here. We need to talk." The silence that followed lasted exactly long enough for 3 people at nearby tables to realize something was wrong, and begin the slow, careful process of pretending not to watch. Sophia's hands were folded in her lap. She was very aware of them. She was very aware of the pressure of her own fingers against each other, the cool weight of her diamond ring, the fact that her breathing had gone completely shallow. "Nathan," she said. Her voice came out steady. She would be proud of that later. In this moment she simply needed it to hold. "What is this?" He had the audacity to look almost apologetic for about half a second. "I should have done this differently," he said. "I know that." "Done what differently?" Victoria shifted in her chair. To her credit, she at least had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. Not enough to stand up. Not enough to matter. But enough to notice. "This isn't working," Nathan said. He gestured with one hand, a loose, almost dismissive movement that was supposed to indicate their marriage, but ended up indicating the entire table, the restaurant, possibly Sophia herself. "You know it isn't. We've both known it for a long time." "Have we?" Sophia said. It wasn't a question. Nathan heard the flatness in her voice and pushed forward anyway, which told her everything she needed to know about how well he had ever understood her. "Victoria and I." "Don't." Sophia's voice didn't rise. It went quieter. "Don't say her name at this table. Not tonight." "Sophia. I planned this dinner 3 weeks ago." She said it slowly, clearly, the way you speak when you are holding something very fragile and very dangerous at the same time. "I found that Bordeaux. I arranged the music. I wrote you a card, Nathan. A card. Because I thought I genuinely believed that you were worth one more attempt." Nathan had the decency to glance at the card envelope still resting near the centerpiece. Something moved across his face. She couldn't tell if it was guilt or just discomfort at being caught mid-exit. "I care about you," he said. "I'll always—" "Stop talking," Sophia said. "And look at me while I say this." He stopped. She made sure he was actually looking at her before she continued. "You brought her here, to this restaurant, on this night, after 7 years. She paused. "That wasn't careless, Nathan. That was deliberate, and I think you know that." The color shifted slightly in his face. She reached across the table, picked up the card she had written, and placed it unopened in her purse. He didn't deserve her words, not tonight. Then she lifted her wine glass, took one slow, composed sip of the sparkling water she had ordered while she waited for him, set it down gently, and stood up. "Sophia. Don't follow me," she said. "Not tonight. Not ever." She reached down, pulled the diamond ring from her finger, and set it on the table beside the bottle of Bordeaux she had spent 2 weeks finding. Then she turned and walked through the restaurant. She did not look at the people watching. She did not hurry. She kept her shoulders back and her chin level, and she walked through Marchetti's like a woman who had made a decision, not like a woman who was falling apart, even though both of those things were true at exactly the same time. She pushed through the front door. The cold air hit her, and only then, standing on the sidewalk outside, did she press one hand over her mouth and breathe. She didn't call Diana right away. She walked. 3 blocks east, 2 blocks south. No destination, just movement, because movement felt like the only thing keeping the weight of the evening from pressing her flat against the pavement. Her phone lit up 3 times. Nathan. She didn't answer. It lit up again. Diana. She answered that one. Tell me, Diana said immediately. Sophia stopped walking. She stood at the corner of a street she walked past 100 times and told Diana what had happened in the flattest, most factual voice she could manage, because if she allowed any feeling into it, she was going to stop being able to speak. By the time she finished, Diana was no longer asking questions. She was simply on the line, breathing, being present in the way only old friends understand how to do. Where are you? Diana asked. Outside, walking. Come here. Come to my apartment right now. I'm okay. Sophia, come here. She went. She didn't sleep that night. She sat in Diana's living room with her shoes off and a cup of tea that went cold, while Diana talked carefully around the things she had clearly been wanting to say for months, and Sophia gradually began to understand that Diana had known something was wrong long before tonight. How long did you know? Sophia asked around 2 in the morning. Diana was quiet for a moment. I suspected, she said. 6 months maybe. Rumors. I didn't have anything real. Sophia nodded. She wasn't angry at Diana for not telling her. She understood in that hollow and exhausted way she understood most things in the middle of the night, that some truths you have to arrive at yourself. Someone else's warning just sounds like noise until the moment the thing itself becomes undeniable. He didn't even look sorry, she said. He looked relieved. I know. I wrote him a card. I know, honey. I found that wine from 2 different... She stopped. The absurdity of it hit her slowly. The sheer elaborate effort of finding a specific bottle of wine for a man who had been planning his exit while she was on the phone with wine merchants. And a sound came out of her that was somewhere between a laugh and something she refused to let become crying. It was a really good wine, Diana said carefully. It was an excellent wine. Sophia pressed the back of her hand against her mouth. And he didn't even open it. They sat with that for a while. 3 days later, the calls from Nathan's attorney started. That was when the real shape of what had happened began to emerge. Because the humiliation at Marchetti's had not been the beginning of what Nathan was doing to her. It had been the ending. The announcement. The signal that the groundwork was already laid. The attorney, a careful, impersonal man named Graves, informed Sophia through a series of formal letters that Nathan intended to cite abandonment in the divorce filing, that certain shared assets had already been transferred to entities that predated their marriage, and that her father's investment in Nathan's company, a significant contribution made in the early years of their relationship, at Nathan's personal request, had been structured in a way that gave Sophia no legal claim to returns. She sat across from her own attorney, a woman named Claire Hawthorne, who had been recommended by Diana, and watched Claire read through the documents with the carefully neutral expression of someone who is working very hard not to say what she is actually thinking. He planned this, Sophia said. Claire set down the papers. These transfers were executed 4 months ago. 4 months. While Sophia had been making dinner reservations and tracking down wine and writing cards by hand, Nathan had been restructuring assets. What about my father's investment? Claire was quiet for a moment. The structure is legal. Aggressive but legal. Your father would have to file separately, and the timeline on recovery. She paused. It would be a long process, and expensive. Sophia thought about her father. Arthur Bennett was 71 years old. He had invested in Nathan's company because Sophia had asked him to, because she had believed in her husband and wanted her family to share in what she thought they were building together. He had done it out of love for her. How bad is it? She asked. For your father. Yes. Claire looked down at the papers again. When she looked back up, she didn't soften it. Sophia had specifically asked her not to soften things. It won't ruin him, Claire said. But it will change his retirement significantly, and his business reputation will take damage. Nathan has already begun. She paused again. There are certain narratives being circulated in business circles about your father's judgment, his competence. Nathan started those rumors. We believe so, yes. Sophia sat with that. Nathan hadn't just cheated on her and walked away. He had spent months constructing an exit strategy that stripped her of assets, hurt her father, and positioned her as the abandoned wife left with nothing too foolish to have seen it coming. He had made her the cautionary tale. He had made her the punchline. She returned to the apartment she had shared with Nathan for 5 of their 7 years, and stood in the center of it, and looked at the life they had built, and understood with total clarity that almost none of it was hers. The furniture, the art, the social calendar that had revolved entirely around his professional relationships. The dinner parties she organized where his clients ate her food and praised his vision. The charitable committees she had joined because they were connected to his business interests. The friendships she had let drift because they hadn't fit the world he was building. 7 years of her life had been investment in someone else's empire, and he had structured it so she left with nothing. Except, there was one thing Nathan had not accounted for. Sophia Bennett had not spent 7 years running his life without learning exactly how he ran it. She knew every client, every deal structure, every relationship that mattered, and every relationship that was pretense. She knew which board members liked him and which ones tolerated him. She knew which contracts had been won on merit and which ones had been won through arrangements that would not survive close examination. She knew things that Nathan in all his careful planning had not thought to protect, because he had never believed she was paying attention. It was Diana who first mentioned the name. They were having coffee 4 days after Marchetti's at a small table at the back of a cafe they had been coming to for years, and Diana said it almost as an afterthought, the way you mention something that has been sitting at the edge of your thoughts long enough that it finally just comes out. Someone was there that night, Diana said, at Marchetti's. Sophia looked up from her cup. I heard this from 2 different people, Diana said carefully. He was at the bar. He saw the whole thing. Who? Diana turned her cup slowly in her hands. Damien Moretti. The name landed differently than most names did in New York social circles. Damien Moretti was not a man you described in simple terms. He was not a man you encountered at charity galas or dinner parties, though he was certainly wealthy enough to attend both. He existed at the edge of the city's power structure, the edge that the financial world, and the legal world, and the political world, all carefully avoided looking at directly. The way you avoid looking directly at a very bright light. Not because you can't, but because doing so too long makes everything else harder to see. Howe was 41 years old. He had been born in Brooklyn to a Sicilian father who had built through methods. Polite society did not discuss one of the most powerful private networks in the northeastern United States. Damien had inherited it at 32 when his father had a stroke and had from all public evidence proceeded to expand it considerably. Howe was not in prison. He had never been charged with anything that stuck. He employed lawyers the way other men employed assistants constantly, extensively, and at significant expense. He was also, by every account Sophia had ever heard, a man of absolutely specific personal standards. He did not break agreements. He did not waste time. He did not under any circumstances allow people to be humiliated in his presence without consequence. He was there, Sophia said. Apparently. Diana paused. And apparently, he wants to speak with you. Sophia set down her coffee cup. How does he know how to find me? Sophia. Diana gave her a look. He's Damien Moretti. He called her directly 2 days later. She didn't know how he had her number. She had considered calling him back after Diana told her, and had decided not to, and had then spent 48 hours half expecting to hear from him and half telling herself she was being ridiculous. Then her phone rang. Private number. She answered. Ms. Bennett. His voice was lower than she expected. Measured. The kind of voice that wasn't raised because it didn't have to be. I apologize for contacting you this way. My name is... I know who you are, she said. A pause. Not long. Just enough to register surprise. Then this will be easier, he said. I'd like to meet. I have a proposal I think you'll find worth hearing. What kind of proposal? The kind that's better discussed in person. She thought about it for approximately 4 seconds. Then she thought about Nathan and his attorney and the asset transfers and her father's retirement, and the word she kept coming back to, the one that had replaced everything else in her chest since she walked out of Marchetti's. That word was enough. Tell me where, she said. They met at a restaurant he owned in Lower Manhattan, a quiet place that didn't advertise itself, where the staff moved with the particular efficiency of people who had been extremely well trained and who understood that discretion was part of their job. He stood when she entered. That surprised her. Damien Moretti in person was not what the stories suggested. Or perhaps he was exactly what the stories suggested, and she had simply expected something more theatrical. He was tall, dark-haired, dressed simply in a way that communicated money without announcing it. He had the kind of face that had probably been handsome at 25, and had become more interesting with age, sharper, more deliberate, carrying the particular weight of someone who had made hard choices and was at peace with most of them. He waited until she sat before he sat down again. "Thank you for coming," he said. "You said you had a proposal." "I do." He didn't reach for the menu. He didn't fill the air with small talk. She appreciated that more than she expected to. "I've been watching Nathan Caldwell for approximately 8 months. He's been involved in arrangements that—" He paused, choosing the word carefully. "Overlap with interests I manage." "You're investigating him." "I'm protecting my interests," he said, "which sometimes looks like investigation." "What does this have to do with me?" He looked at her directly. "You know things about his operations that I don't. You've been inside that world for 7 years. The client relationships, the deal structures, the decisions made in rooms where no one was taking notes." He paused. "I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. I'm asking you to have a conversation. Several, possibly. And in exchange—" "In exchange for what?" she said. "I have resources," he said. "Legal resources, financial resources, and information of my own that could be considerably useful to your attorney." He paused again. "Your father's investment doesn't have to be a loss." She studied him. He let her study him without filling the silence. "Why?" she said. "Why what? Why does this matter to you? If Nathan's arrangements overlap with your interests, you have lawyers, you have resources, you don't need information from an ex-wife." She kept her voice level. "So why does this matter to you specifically?" Something shifted in his expression. Very slightly. Like a door opening a quarter inch before someone decided how far to open it. "I watched what he did to you in that restaurant," he said. "And I've been in enough rooms with enough powerful men to know the difference between someone who makes mistakes and someone who plans cruelty." He held her gaze. "What he did to you that night was planned. The timing, the location, the public nature of it. He wanted witnesses. He wanted it to define how people saw you going forward." Sophia said nothing. "Men who operate that way," Damien continued, "tend to leave other damage behind them. And I have a personal objection to men who treat people as leverage." He paused. "It's not complicated." She looked at him for a long moment. "I'm not going to become someone's pawn," she said. "Not again. Whatever arrangement we discuss, I need to be clear about that from the beginning." He nodded, without hesitation. "That's exactly why I called you instead of someone else," he said. She picked up the menu. And for the first time since she had walked out of Marchetti's, she felt something in her chest that wasn't grief or anger or the hollow exhaustion of betrayal. She felt the very first edge of something that might become a plan. She drove home from that dinner with Damien Moretti and sat in her car for 11 minutes before going inside. Not because she was afraid. Not because she had doubts about the meeting itself. But because something had shifted during that hour at his restaurant, and she needed to locate exactly what it was before she moved another step forward. She had walked in expecting a transaction. She had expected the particular kind of man who saw a woman in a damaged position and recognized opportunity. The type who framed leverage as generosity and called it partnership. She had spent 7 years married to a version of that man. She knew the shape of it intimately. Damien Moretti was not that shape. That was what she needed to sit with. Because if she was wrong about him, the consequences would be considerably more serious than a failed marriage. And if she was right about him, if he was exactly what he appeared to be across that table, then the question was not whether to trust him. The question was whether she could trust her own judgment after 7 years of having it used against her. She went inside. She poured a glass of water, stood at the kitchen counter, and opened her laptop. She had work to do. Sophia had always been methodical. It was one of the things Nathan had benefited from enormously and complimented almost never. While he operated on instinct and charm, and the kind of confident forward momentum that impressive men often mistake for strategy, Sophia had quietly been the one constructing the actual architecture behind him. She had kept records. Not out of suspicion, at least not initially. Out of habit. Out of the bone-deep professional instinct that told her important information should be organized and accessible and documented in a way that didn't depend on anyone's memory. She had records of client correspondence, meeting notes, deal summaries, contract timelines, references to conversations. Nathan had told her about casual comments over dinner that she had written down, not because she was building a case, but because she was the kind of person who wrote things down. She had not fully understood until now what she was sitting on. She pulled up the files she had kept on a personal hard drive. Not Nathan's servers, not the company cloud, but her own external drive she had been using since before their marriage, and she began going through them with different eyes than she'd had when she created them. It took her 2 hours to find the first inconsistency, and 40 minutes after that to find the second one, which was not an inconsistency so much as a pattern. She sat back in her chair and looked at what she had assembled on the screen and said nothing for a full minute, because what she was looking at was not the evidence of a man who had made careless mistakes. It was the evidence of a man who had been running a separate strategy inside his own company for years. And she had been close enough to see it. She just hadn't been looking. She called Claire Hawthorne at 8 the next morning. "I need to meet today," she said when Claire answered. "I have a..." "Today, Claire, please." A pause. Then, 11 o'clock, my office. She was there at 10:50. She set her laptop on Claire's desk and walked her through what she had found over the previous night methodically without rushing, because Claire was the kind of attorney who needed to understand something completely before she would allow herself to react to it. When Sophia finished, Claire sat back in her chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment. "Where did you get these?" "My personal drive. Records I kept during our marriage. Meeting notes. Correspondence summaries. Nothing stolen, nothing from his servers. My own documentation." "And you're certain these are accurate?" "I wrote them myself, yes." Claire folded her hands on the desk. "If these patterns are what they look like, and I want to be careful about that qualifier, then what Nathan has been doing goes significantly beyond aggressive asset protection in a divorce." "I know. This would be material for a regulatory inquiry." "I know that too." "Sophia." Claire leaned forward. "How are you approaching this? What do you want?" She had thought about that question for most of the night. "I want my father whole," she said. "His investment, his reputation, both." She paused. "And I want Nathan to answer for what he actually did, not just the version of it he's been able to structure around." Claire held her gaze. "That's a significant goal." "I'm aware. You're going to need support beyond what this office can provide. Resources. Potentially access to..." "I'm working on that," Sophia said. Claire studied her for a moment. "Damien Moretti," she said. It wasn't a question. Sophia met her eyes. His name came up. "He has resources that would be relevant to this." Claire chose her words with care. "He also has a particular reputation, and I'd be doing you a disservice if I didn't flag that engaging with him carries its own set of complications." "I'm aware of who he is." "Are you aware of what engaging with him could mean for how people see you?" "Nathan's already working a narrative. If you're connected to Moretti, then Nathan's narrative becomes the least of anyone's concerns," Sophia said, "because the actual facts of what he did will be considerably more interesting than any story he's been crafting about me." Claire was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "All right, keep me informed of everything." "I will." "And Sophia." She paused. "Be careful. Not because I doubt your judgment, but because men like Nathan, when they feel cornered, don't behave predictably." Sophia picked up her bag and stood. "I know," she said. "I was married to him." She and Damien met 4 more times over the following 2 weeks, not always at his restaurant. Once at a midtown office that bore no visible connection to him, but where the staff deferred to him in the particular way that told you everything you needed to know about ownership. Once at a park of all places, because she had called him at 7 in the morning when something had clicked in her head and she needed to think out loud, and he had said without any apparent surprise, "There's a bench on the east side of the reservoir. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He had been there in 18. She told him what she had found. She didn't show him the documents, not yet, not until she was certain of the parameters of their arrangement, but she described the shape of it, the pattern, the timeline, what it suggested about Nathan's operations, and the specific areas where Damien's own interests were being affected. He listened the way few people actually listened, not waiting for his turn to speak, not assembling his response while she was still talking, but actually taking in what she said and sitting with it before responding. "The Henderson account," he said at one point. She stopped. "What do you know about the Henderson account?" "More than Nathan thinks I do." His jaw tightened barely just enough to notice if you were watching closely. It was structured through a subsidiary that was supposed to be clean. He told 3 different parties 3 different things about where the returns were going. "I have documentation of a meeting where the subsidiary was discussed," Sophia said slowly. "Nathan mentioned it at dinner about 2 years ago. I wrote it down." Damien looked at her. There was something in his expression, not surprise exactly, but a recalibration, the particular look of a man who had arrived with one assessment and was updating it. "You wrote down a dinner conversation about a subsidiary." "I write everything down." "Why?" She thought about how to answer that honestly. "Because I grew up watching my father build things carefully. And I think somewhere along the way, I understood that the people who actually keep things running are usually not the ones whose names are on the building." She paused. "I was protecting something I believed in, even when it wasn't protecting me back." Damien was quiet for a moment. "Send what you have to Claire Hawthorne," he said. "Securely. I'll have my legal team connect with her this week. What you're describing combined with what I already have. Nathan isn't just exposed in the divorce. He's exposed in ways that make the divorce almost irrelevant." "That's what I thought." "It also makes him dangerous," Damien said. "I need you to understand that. Men who are about to lose everything they built on deception, they don't accept it gracefully. You said that before. I'm saying it again because I mean it differently now." His voice was flat and direct, not threatening, just honest in the particular way she had come to recognize as his default. "You're not just his ex-wife with a grievance anymore. You're a liability to him. He will figure that out eventually." "What do you suggest?" "I suggest you don't go anywhere alone that he knows about," he said. "And that you let me know if you hear from him directly." She looked at him across the bench. "Is this the part where you tell me you'll protect me?" Something that might have been amusement moved across his face. Brief, almost gone before it arrived. "This is the part where I tell you that protecting your own interests and protecting yourself are the same project right now, and I'd prefer not to manage one while losing the other." He paused. "It's not romantic. It's practical." "Good," she said. "I don't need romantic. I've had romantic." Nathan called her 14 days after Marchetti's. She had expected him to let the attorneys handle everything that had been his style throughout their marriage, delegating the uncomfortable things, managing at distance. The fact that he called directly told her the attorneys had briefed him on the divorce proceedings, and something in those briefings had concerned him. She answered because she wanted to hear what he sounded like when he was concerned. "Sophia." His voice was the careful version. The version she remembered from the early years when he still modulated himself around her. "I think we need to talk, not through lawyers." "We're talking now," she said. "In person. I think the way things ended at the restaurant was not—" He stopped, started again. "I made a mistake in how I handled that night." "Which part?" she said. "The mistress or the location?" Silence. "Both," he said finally. "It was cruel. I know that. And I want you to know that what's happening with the attorneys, I didn't intend for it to go this direction." "What direction did you intend?" "A clean separation. Fair terms. I didn't want—" "Nathan." She kept her voice completely even. "I've seen the asset transfers. I know the timeline. I know when they were executed." She paused. You spent 4 months building an exit that left me with nothing. Don't call it something it wasn't. The silence that followed was different from the one before. Colder. You've been talking to someone, he said. She said nothing. Who have you been? He stopped. And in the quality of that stop, she heard the exact moment he arrived at the answer on his own. Sophia. His voice changed. The careful version was gone. Something else replaced it, harder, with an edge she had heard from him before, but never quite aimed at her so directly. Tell me you haven't been talking to Damien Moretti. My conversations are my own concern. He is dangerous, Nathan said. The words came out fast now, the controlled pace abandoned. Whatever he's told you, whatever he's offering, he is using you. You understand that he doesn't care about you or your father or any of it. He wants what I have, and you are the most convenient route. Nathan. She let one beat of silence land. You're describing yourself. He stopped talking. Whatever Damien Moretti's motives are, she said, he has never sat across a table from me and pretended to love me while moving money behind my back. He's never humiliated me in public as part of a planned strategy. He's never used my father as leverage. She paused. So when you warn me about dangerous men, I want you to hear how that lands. Sophia. Don't call me again unless it's through our attorneys. She kept her voice level. Calm. And Nathan, I found the Henderson account. She hung up. Her hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear. From the very specific adrenaline that comes from saying true things out loud to someone who believed you would never figure them out. She sat down, breathed through it, and then texted Damien. He called. He knows about us meeting. He mentioned your name. I mentioned Henderson. 3 minutes later, her phone buzzed. Expected. Are you all right? She looked at those 3 words for a moment. In 7 years of marriage, Nathan had never once asked her that question with that level of directness. Yes, she typed back. Call me if he contacts you again, he replied. And well done. She went to see her father that weekend. Arthur Bennett lived 40 minutes outside the city, in the house where Sophia had grown up. A house that still smelled like old books, and her mother's preferred tea, and the particular combination of wood and time that meant home in a way no apartment in Manhattan ever had. Howe was sitting on the back porch when she arrived. He was 71 years old, but had always carried himself younger than that, upright, deliberate, the posture of a man who had worked hard all his life and saw no reason to apologize for the space he occupied. Watching him from the back door before he noticed her, Sophia felt the grief of the past 2 weeks hit her freshly, because this man had invested in her husband's company, because she had asked him to, and she had to tell him now what that investment was worth. He turned before she could prepare herself further. There she is, he said, the way he always said it, like arriving was an accomplishment worth acknowledging. She sat in the chair beside him, and they talked about small things for a while, the way people do when there is a larger thing waiting. He asked about the apartment. She said she was staying with a friend some nights, her own place others. He asked if she was sleeping. She said mostly. Then he asked what she had actually come to say. Dad. She turned toward him. Nathan's attorneys have been in contact with you. Last week, he said. Their position on the investment is... He paused. Not favorable. I know. I want you to hear from me that I'm working on it. He looked at her. Working on it how? I have documentation, she said, of things Nathan was doing inside the company that go beyond the divorce. And I have... She paused, finding the right word. Allies. People with resources and information who are already building a case. Her father was quiet for a moment. What kind of allies? She held his gaze. The effective kind. He studied her with the particular look he'd had since she was a child. The look that said he was measuring not just what she said, but whether she had thought it through, whether she was acting from strength or from pain. Are you being careful? He said finally. Yes. Not just legally. Are you being careful with yourself? The question opened something in her chest she hadn't realized she'd been keeping closed. She breathed through it. I'm angry, she said honestly. And I'm tired. But I'm not doing anything reckless. I'm doing what I know how to do. I'm building something instead of breaking down." He reached over and covered her hand with his. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "Your mother would have said the same thing, in exactly that order." The first public move came from Nathan's side. 3 weeks after Marchetti's piece appeared in a business column, the kind that was too specifically informed to be coincidence, suggesting that Sophia had left the marriage in chaos, that her management of Nathan's affairs had been erratic, that certain losses in the company's client base over the past 2 years could be traced to decisions she had influenced. It was calculated, targeted, the kind of narrative that didn't need to be proven to do damage, because damage in social circles is done by suggestion, not conviction. Diana called her the morning the piece ran. "He's hitting your professional reputation," Diana said. Her voice was controlled but tight. "He's trying to make you unhireable before you can." "I know." Sophia was already at her laptop. "I saw it." "What do you want to do?" "Nothing. Yet." "Sophia, I wants a reaction," she said. "He wants me defensive. He wants me running around correcting things and looking rattled while he keeps building the story." She closed the laptop. "We let it sit, for now." "That requires an enormous amount of patience." "I know." She stood up. "I've had 7 years of practice." Damien saw the piece. He called her that afternoon not to strategize, but to simply ask one question. "Are you going to let it stand?" "For now," she said. "Is that a problem for you?" "No." A pause. "It's interesting, actually." "Why?" "Because most people's instinct when they're attacked publicly is to defend immediately. It's emotional. Understandable." Another pause. "You're thinking 3 moves ahead." "I'm thinking about what Nathan wants versus what actually serves my position," she said. "They're not the same thing. They rarely are." Damien was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had something in it she hadn't heard before. Something that wasn't assessment or strategy, but was closer, she thought, to genuine respect. "There is something I should tell you," he said, "about why I was at Marchetti's that night." She waited. "I had been watching Nathan for 8 months. Part of that monitoring involved knowing his movements, where he went, who he met." He paused. "I knew he had made a reservation that night. I knew the reservation was for an anniversary dinner. And I knew from sources I won't detail that he was planning to bring Victoria Lane." The air in the room changed. "You knew," she said slowly, "before I arrived." "Yes." "And you didn't—" She stopped. The next word caught somewhere before it reached her mouth. "I considered warning you," he said. "And then I considered what that would look like. An unknown man calling a married woman to tell her husband was planning to humiliate her. Whether you would believe it. Whether it would change anything." A pause. "And I made a judgment call that was possibly wrong. I went instead. I thought if things went badly, I could—" He stopped. "Could what?" "Be useful," he said quietly. She sat with that. It was a strange thing. She knew she should perhaps be angry that he had possessed information she would have valued and withheld it. But she also understood, standing on the other side of the most defining night of her adult life, that she might not have believed him. That even hearing it, she might have arrived at Marchetti's anyway, because the truth of a marriage in collapse is that you already know, and you go through the motions of not knowing, because the knowing is too heavy to carry until you have no choice. "Why are you telling me now?" she said. "Because I don't want the foundation of whatever this is to be something I kept from you," he said. "And because you will figure it out eventually on your own. You figure out most things." She exhaled slowly. "I'm going to need some time with that," she said. "Take it," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." What Sophia did not tell Damien. What she did not tell anyone yet. Not even Diana. Not even Claire, was that she had found something else in her files 2 nights after their park meeting. Something that went beyond the patterns she had already shared. Something that, if accurate, explained not just Nathan's personal behavior, but the entire financial structure of what he had been building over the past 3 years. She had found it in a set of meeting notes from a company dinner she had organized 2.5 years ago. A dinner for 6 people, 3 of whom were Nathan's business partners, and 3 of whom she had been told were clients. She had written down names, notes, fragments of conversation she had overheard while managing the room, because that was what she did. She managed every room she was responsible for, and managing meant paying attention. One of those fragments was 11 words. 11 words that connected Nathan's company to a name Sophia recognized not from Nathan's world, but from a story Diana had mentioned once almost 2 years ago about a city contract scandal that had been investigated and quietly buried. She had written those 11 words down the same night and filed them without understanding their significance. She understood their significance now. And she understood something else sitting in her apartment with the document open on her screen. She understood that what she was holding was not just leverage in a divorce proceeding. It was leverage over a network. A large, carefully protected, extensively connected network of people who had extraordinary incentive to ensure that she and anyone who might use what she knew was neutralized before any of this became public. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. "You should stop looking into things you don't understand, for your own sake." She stared at it. Then she screenshotted it, forwarded it to Claire and to Damien with the single sentence, "It's bigger than we thought." And she sat there in the quiet of her apartment, no longer the woman who had arrived at Marchetti's with roses and a handwritten card, and the hope that love was worth one more attempt, and felt the particular cold clarity of a person who has passed the point of no return. She was not going back. She was not slowing down. Whatever Nathan had built on the back of her invisible labor and her father's trust and 7 years of her life, she was going to dismantle every piece of it. Not out of rage. Out of something quieter and more permanent than rage. Out of the simple iron-spined conviction that the truth deserved to be standing when all of this was over. Her phone rang. "Damien." She answered. "I got your message," he said. His voice was steady. "Tell me what you found." She opened the file on her screen, and she began to talk. Damien listened to everything without interrupting once. That was the first thing she noticed. In 7 years of marriage, Nathan had interrupted her an average of 3 times per conversation. She had never counted, but she felt the accuracy of that number with the certainty of lived experience. He interrupted because he was already forming his response before she finished, because he believed his reaction was more important than her complete thought, because the habit of half-listening had become so embedded in him that he probably no longer noticed he was doing it. Damien sat on the other end of the phone and let her talk until she was finished. When he said nothing for a moment. Then, "Read me the 11 words." She looked at the screen. She had been looking at them for 2 hours. She knew them by memory now, but she read them from the document anyway, because precision mattered. She read them. Another silence. Longer this time. "Sophia." His voice had changed. Not alarmed, she was learning that alarmed was not a register Damien Moretti used, but focused in a way that was different from his usual focus, sharper the way a lens changes when the subject suddenly becomes clear. "Where are you right now?" "My apartment." "Don't stay there tonight." She felt the hairs on her arms rise, not from fear, she told herself, from the recognition of something serious being taken seriously. "You know what those 11 words mean." "I know exactly what they mean," he said. "And so does Nathan, which is why you received that text." A pause. "This isn't about a divorce anymore. You understand that." "I understood it when I found it." "Good. Pack what you need for a few days. I'm sending someone to you in 30 minutes. Don't open the door for anyone before then." "Damien." "I'm not trying to control you," he said, and she heard the deliberate care in how he said it. "I'm telling you what I know about the people whose name appears in those 11 words. And what I know is that they have spent considerable resources keeping that name out of exactly this kind of conversation." He paused. "The text you received was a warning. The next contact won't be." She looked at the anonymous text still open on her phone. "You should stop looking into things you don't understand, for your own sake." She had lived with them long enough to know the architecture of a threat. He delivered them calmly through reasonable-sounding language in ways that allowed him to later claim he had only been expressing concern. This had the same architecture. 30 minutes, she said. 28 now. She packed in 14. She was not a woman who needed long to decide what mattered. A week of rebuilding her life from nothing had clarified that, with remarkable efficiency. She took her laptop, her external hard drive, the folder of documents she had been compiling with Claire, 3 days of clothing, and the handwritten card she had never given Nathan, not because she intended to give it to anyone, but because it was hers. She had written those words. They belonged to her. The person Damien sent was a woman. That surprised Sophia in a way she hadn't anticipated. She had opened the door with her bag already on her shoulder, prepared for the particular experience of being escorted by a large and silent man who communicated through implication, and instead found a woman in her mid-40s with a calm professional bearing and a dark jacket and the specific kind of alert stillness that told you immediately she was very good at her job. "Ms. Bennett," the woman said. "I'm Elena. Mr. Moretti asked me to bring you somewhere secure. My ID is in my left jacket pocket if you'd like to see it." Sophia looked at her for a moment. "Are you armed?" she asked. "Yes." "Are you good at your job?" A slight pause. Something that wasn't quite a smile. "Very." "Then let's go," Sophia said. Damien was waiting at the property in Brooklyn, not the restaurant, not the Midtown office, but a brownstone that felt lived in a way his other spaces hadn't furnished, with the particular warmth of a place someone actually occupied, rather than maintained for professional purposes. I was on a call when she arrived. He held up one finger in her direction. "Give me 1 minute," and she set her bag down and stood in the front room and looked at the bookshelves covering the far wall while he finished the call. He had an enormous number of books. That had not been in any story she had heard about Damien Moretti. He hung up. "Are you all right?" he asked. "You keep asking me that. You keep being in situations that warrant it." She turned from the bookshelf. "What do you know about the name in those 11 words?" He pulled out a chair at the table near the window and waited until she sat before he sat across from her. He put both hands flat on the table, an open, visible gesture she was starting to recognize as his version of, "I am going to be completely honest with you." "Hargrove Capital," he said. She had not said the name aloud. She felt the confirmation of it land somewhere in her chest. "It's not a legitimate investment firm," he said. "It functions as one on paper. In practice, it is a vehicle for moving money through channels that cannot withstand examination. It has connections to 3 city officials, 1 state senator, and a federal contracts process that has been under informal scrutiny for 2 years, but has never been formally investigated." He paused. "Because the people with the authority to investigate it are connected to it. And Nathan," Sophia said slowly, "is connected to Hargrove. Nathan has been channeling a percentage of certain client returns through a Hargrove subsidiary for approximately 3 years. Damien held her gaze. "He's not the architect of it. He's a participant, a willing one who was rewarded well for his cooperation, and who has been protected because he knows enough to be dangerous if he became motivated to talk. He's been laundering money," she said. "A portion of returns, yes." She sat with that for a moment. "The documentation I found," she said. "The meeting notes. If what I heard that night at that dinner is what I now think it was, then you have independent contemporaneous documentation of a conversation that connects Nathan to Hargrove at a time, and in a context that his own records almost certainly don't reflect." Damien's voice was level. "Because Nathan would have made sure that meeting looked like a dinner, not a business discussion." "It was both," Sophia said. "I managed the room. I heard the conversation. I wrote it down." "I know." She looked at him across the table. "What do we do with this?" "That depends on what you want," he said. "And I need you to hear me clearly when I say that, because this is your information, your documentation, your 7 years. The choice of what to do with it is yours." She had not expected that. She had expected him to have a plan to present it to require her agreement. It was what powerful men did. They arrived with the architecture already built and invited you to inhabit it. "What are my options?" she said. "You could give what you have to the right federal contact and let it move through official channels," he said. "That protects you legally entirely. It also gives you no control over timing outcomes or how your father's situation is handled. The process is slow and uncertain. Or we build the complete picture first, using what you have, what I have, and what Claire's team has been assembling, and we present it in a way that removes Nathan's ability to use his Hargrove connections as a shield. He paused. He's protected right now because he's useful to them. We make him a liability instead. At that point, the people above him will either distance themselves completely, or they will make mistakes trying to manage him. Either way, his protection disappears. And then what he did to you and your father becomes a matter of public and legal record, with no one powerful enough to bury it. She looked at the books on his shelves for a moment, not seeing them, thinking. How long does the second option take? 6 to 8 weeks, done correctly. And the risk to me personally during those 6 to 8 weeks? He didn't soften it. Real. Which is why you're here tonight and not in your apartment. She nodded slowly. The second option, she said. He nodded. No visible relief. No told you so. He simply accepted her answer and moved forward, which she was learning was simply how he operated. Then we start tomorrow, he said. Tonight you rest. She almost laughed. You think I'm going to sleep? No, he said. But I think you should eat something. You haven't eaten since this morning. She stared at him. How do you know that? Something moved in his expression, not quite embarrassment. The look of a man who has revealed more than he intended through a specific piece of information. Elena noted that there was nothing in your kitchen when she came to collect you. She had time to check my kitchen. She had 14 minutes, he said. She's thorough. Sophia looked at him across the table. In the particular quiet of that room, in the aftermath of the most compressed and destabilizing 2 weeks of her adult life, she felt something so simple it nearly undid her. She felt safe, not rescued, not dependent. Just safe in the basic and fundamental sense of being in a space where no one was working against her. Okay, she said quietly. I'll eat something. The next 3 weeks moved at 2 different speeds simultaneously. On the surface, nothing appeared to change. The divorce proceedings continued through the attorneys. Nathan's business column piece floated in the social landscape without correction. Sophia appeared at 2 professional events Claire had advised, maintaining visibility, refusing to look like a woman in retreat, and conducted herself with the composed steadiness of someone who had not spent the previous nights building a case that could alter the financial and political landscape of half a dozen careers. Beneath the surface, everything was accelerating. Claire's team working with documentation Sophia had provided, and with financial records. Damien's people had accessed through entirely legitimate means, publicly filed disclosures, cross-referenced through sophisticated analytical tools, began assembling what Claire called in one of their late-night calls, the most coherent picture of deliberate financial misconduct she had seen assembled outside of a federal investigation. Sophia worked 12, sometimes 14 hours a day. Not from anxiety, but from the particular focus that comes when you finally understand what you are doing and why it matters. She cross-referenced her meeting notes against corporate filings. She identified 3 specific moments in Nathan's company timeline where decisions that looked like business strategy were actually responses to Hargrove's directives. She mapped the relationships clients, board members, intermediaries, with the same methodical intelligence she had applied for 7 years to building Nathan's professional life. Except now, the building was a different kind entirely. And in the evenings when the work required stepping back from the details to see the shape of the whole, she and Damien talked. Not always about the case. That surprised her. She had expected their interactions to remain professional, transactional, as she had originally anticipated, and instead, she found herself in conversations that moved without design, through things that had nothing to do with Nathan or Hargrove or asset transfers. He told her about his father, not in depth, not in the confessional way she might have expected, but in the careful way of a man who had come to terms with a complicated inheritance and spoke about it honestly because dishonesty cost more than it was worth. She told him about her mother who had died when Sophia was 22, and about how she had chosen to channel grief into competence, because competence felt like something she could control, and grief did not. That's why you write everything down, he said one evening. She looked at him. What do you mean? You started documenting things after she died, he said. It was a statement, not a question. She thought about it. I don't know when I started. I do. The earliest records you've shared with Claire's team are dated 4 months after your mother's death. He wasn't pressing it, just observing, but his voice was quiet. You were 22, alone with a grief you couldn't control. So you started controlling information. She didn't answer immediately. She stopped. That's a very specific observation. I pay attention to people, he said simply. She looked at him. I know you do, she said. The first crack in Nathan's armor appeared on a Tuesday. Claire called at 8 in the morning, her voice containing the particular quality of controlled excitement that Sophia had learned meant significant development. One of the board members wants to talk, Claire said. Sophia set down her coffee. Which one? Gerald Marsh. She knew Marsh. Had sat beside him at 3 company dinners. Had managed seating arrangements specifically to cultivate his relationship with Nathan, because Nathan had told her 2 years ago that Marsh was crucial to a board vote he needed. She had researched Marsh's interests, had ensured conversations happened at the right moments, had laid groundwork. Nathan had then walked across and claimed as his natural rapport. What does he want? Sophia asked. He's been aware of the Hargrove connection for a year, Claire said. He didn't know the full scope. He has documentation of his own board communications that he believes Nathan altered before they were formally filed. A pause. I wants immunity from civil liability in exchange for cooperation. He's frightened. He should be, Sophia said. What does this do to the timeline? Accelerates it significantly, with Marsh's cooperation. Claire paused. Sophia, if this holds, we are looking at something that goes considerably beyond a divorce settlement. Nathan is looking at potential regulatory action and the Hargrove connections. I know, she said. I know what it means. After she hung up, she sat quietly for a moment. Then she called Damien. Marsh, he said when she told him. Yes, I thought it might be him. A pause. He's been making inquiries through a back channel for about 2 weeks. He was looking for a way out before the exit closed. You knew he was looking? I suspected. I didn't want to tell you until it was real. He paused. Are you ready for what comes next? She thought about what came next. Nathan discovering that Marsh had moved. Nathan's Hargrove protectors discovering that the documentary picture was becoming coherent and damaging. The specific and predictable panic of powerful men who suddenly understand they have misjudged the capability of the person they thought they'd neutralized. Yes, she said. I've been ready for weeks. Nathan found out about Marsh on a Thursday. Sophia knew because he showed up. Not at the brownstone. He didn't know about the brownstone. But she had returned to her apartment that morning to collect additional documents and to maintain the appearance of normal routine. And she was there when the buzzer rang, and she looked at the intercom camera and saw her ex-husband's face looking directly into the lens with an expression she had never seen from him before. Not controlled, not charming, not the careful social version of himself he maintained in public. Frightened. She almost didn't let him in. She buzzed him up because she wanted to see it up close, because she had spent 7 years watching Nathan Caldwell manage every situation from a position of fabricated security, and she wanted to see what he looked like when that security was gone. He came through the door fast. What did you give them? He said. No greeting, no performance of civility. Hello, Nathan? Don't. He stopped in the middle of the room. His jacket was slightly disheveled. He had been running his hands through his hair, she could tell. Marsh called me this morning. He told me he'd been contacted by your attorney. He told me... He stopped himself. Composed. Tried again. What have you done? I've been protecting my interests, she said, which is what you were doing for 4 months before our anniversary dinner. I'm just better at it than you thought. You don't understand what you're involved in, he said. The people connected to some of this, you have no idea. Hargrove Capital, she said. He went very still. The color in his face changed in a way she would remember for a long time. Not just pale, but emptied like something fundamental had been removed from behind his eyes. How? He couldn't finish the sentence. I managed every room you were ever in, Nathan, she said quietly. Every dinner, Every client meeting. Every conversation you thought was private because you'd forgotten I was there. She paused. You forgot I was there a lot. That was your most consistent mistake. He stared at her. You need to stop, he said. His voice was different now, lower. The fear had shifted into something adjacent to it that she recognized as the animal desperation of a man who has run out of moves. Sophia, I am telling you, these are not people who accept exposure. They will. I know what they'll do, she said. That's why what I have is not only in my possession. It's in the possession of people who have considerably more resources for managing that kind of pressure than you do. She held his gaze. You built your protection through one network. I've built mine through another. And mine is not dependent on people who are currently deciding whether you are more useful to them, protected or abandoned. The silence that followed was the most complete she had ever shared with Nathan. Because they both understood what she had just said. And they both understood that she was right. The way you handled our marriage, she said, the exit you constructed that was about making sure I had nothing. No resources, no standing, no one who would take me seriously. She kept her voice level. How is that working out? He looked at her for a long moment, and then something happened that she had not anticipated. Nathan Caldwell, the man who had walked into Marchetti's with another woman on his arm and a 7-year exit strategy in his pocket, sat down in the chair nearest the door and put his head in his hands. Not theatrically, not as a bid for sympathy. Just the simple total collapse of a man who has finally run out of distance between himself and the consequences of his own choices. She watched him. She felt no satisfaction. That surprised her. She had imagined this moment or something like it during the long nights of the previous weeks, and she had imagined it feeling like something. Triumph or vindication or the clean release of anger finally earning its answer. It felt like none of those things. It felt like standing at the end of a very long road and understanding that the road itself had been the real thing, not the destination. What do you want? He said. His voice was muffled. He still had his head down. I want my father whole, she said. His investment returned, his reputation restored. In writing through your attorneys within 2 weeks. She paused. I want the asset transfers reversed as far as they can be reversed. And I want a statement, a formal documented statement, acknowledging that the characterization of my role in your company's difficulties was fabricated. He lifted his head. His eyes were red at the edges. And if I do all of that, then what I know about Hargrove is shared with people who will handle it through appropriate channels. She held his gaze. That process will happen regardless. But your cooperation determines how central your role in it appears. He stared at her for a long time. You learned this from him, he said finally. Moretti. She considered that. No, she said. I learned this from 7 years of watching you. He just gave me the space to use it. Nathan left 40 minutes later. He did not make any promises. He was not yet at the stage where promises were possible. He was still in the stage where the ground was shifting too fast beneath him to know where to stand. But he left differently than he had arrived, and Sophia understood that the conversation had done what it needed to do. She called Damien the moment the door closed. I was just here, she said. A pause that was longer than his usual pauses. At your apartment. Yes. Are you all right? Stop asking me that. Are you? She sat down on the couch she had bought herself in the apartment she was choosing to keep in the life she was rebuilding from the inside out. Yes, she said. I'm yes. What happened? She told him. When she finished, the silence on the other end carried a different quality than the ones before it. She couldn't name what it was exactly. Not concern, not relief. Something that belonged to neither category but sat near both of them. Sophia, he said finally. Yes. I need to tell you something. And I need you to hear it the way I mean it, not through any other context. She waited. When I came to find you after Marchetti's, he said, it was for the reasons I told you. The overlap with my interests. The information you might have. All of that was true. He paused. It is no longer the reason I am involved in this. She said nothing. I want to be clear about that, he said. Because I don't operate by obscuring my motives from people I... Another pause. From people who matter to me. And I need you to know that what I'm doing now I'm doing because you matter to me. Not because of what you know or what you can access. Because of who you are. She sat very still. Outside the city moved in its constant, indifferent way. That's a significant thing to say, she said finally. I know. Given everything that's happening. I know the timing is complicated, he said. I'm not asking you for anything. I'm just done not saying it. She breathed. In 7 years of marriage, Nathan had told her he loved her regularly. He had said the words easily, fluently, the way some people say fine when you ask how they are automatically without weight. The last time she could remember him saying it, and meaning it was so distant, she could no longer accurately locate it. Damien Moretti had just told her she mattered to him, and the weight of those 4 words was more substantial than anything Nathan had said to her in years. I hear you, she said quietly. That's enough, he said. For now, that's enough. 3 days later, Nathan's attorney contacted Claire with a preliminary offer. It was not everything Sophia had asked for. It was a significant portion of it, the asset reversal, the documentation on her father's investment. A carefully worded statement about her role that stopped short of full retraction but moved considerably in that direction. Claire called her with the details. It's a starting position, Claire said. They're testing how serious you are. Tell them it's not sufficient, Sophia said. And tell them we have a meeting with a federal contact scheduled for next Friday. She paused. That part is true, by the way. Claire was quiet for a moment. When did that happen? Yesterday, Sophia said. Damien's legal team made an introduction. All right. A pause. Sophia, this is moving very fast. I know. Are you prepared for what happens when this becomes public? Because when it does, and it will, your name is going Moretti, the Hargrove investigation, everything. Sophia looked at the window. At the city outside it. At the version of her own life that was being rewritten in real time, not by Nathan's narrative anymore, but by facts, by documentation, by the 7 years of careful attention she had poured into a marriage that hadn't deserved it, but which had, in the end, given her something Nathan never intended to give her. Knowledge. Understanding. A blueprint of exactly how power operated and exactly where its weaknesses were. Yes, she said. I'm prepared. She was done being managed. She was done being the woman at the table whom everyone expected to cry. The next move was hers, and she intended to make it count. The meeting with the federal contact happened on a Friday morning in a building that looked from the outside entirely unremarkable. Sophia had been in a lot of unremarkable-looking buildings over the past 6 weeks. She had learned that the most consequential conversations in this city consistently happened in rooms that gave nothing away from the exterior. No brass plates, no dramatic architecture, nothing that announced itself. Power, she had come to understand, almost never announced itself. That was what made it power. She went with Claire. Damien had offered to come, and she had told him no, not because she doubted his value in the room, but because she needed this meeting to be hers. She needed to walk in as Sophia Bennett, not as Nathan's ex-wife, not as Damien Moretti's associate, but as the woman who had spent 7 years building something that turned out to be evidence, and who had walked into a restaurant for her anniversary dinner, and walked out with her entire life reoriented. She needed to be the person at the center of this. Not because of ego, because it was true, and truth was the only currency she had ever been able to entirely trust. The federal contact was a woman named Special Agent Renata Voss. Mid-50s. Gray at her temples. The kind of stillness that came from 25 years of listening to people tell her things they had never told anyone else, and learning to hold all of it without reacting until she had what she needed. She shook Sophia's hand and said, "Thank you for coming," and meant it in a way that was neither warm nor cold, simply direct. They sat. Claire had prepared a comprehensive document package. Sophia had reviewed it 3 times. She knew every page, every reference, every footnote. Agent Voss read the first section in silence. Then she looked up. "Where did you obtain these meeting notes?" she asked. "I wrote them myself," Sophia said. "During the period they reference. They were kept on my personal hard drive entirely separate from any company system. And you have no reason to believe they were altered after the fact. I have every reason to believe they weren't, Sophia said. Because I wrote them for myself, not for anyone else. There was nothing to gain by altering them. I didn't know what I had until 6 weeks ago. Voss held her gaze for a moment. The Henderson account, she said. Sophia felt Claire shift slightly in her chair beside her. They had not expected Voss to name it that quickly. You know about it, Claire said carefully. We've known a version of it for 14 months, Voss said. What we haven't had is independent contemporaneous documentation that places Nathan Caldwell in a specific conversation at a specific time with a specific reference that confirms knowing participation. She paused. Until now, the room was very quiet. How long has this investigation been active? Claire asked. I can't share that fully. Voss set the document down and folded her hands. What I can tell you is that the documentation Ms. Bennett has provided fills a significant gap that has been limiting our ability to move forward. She looked at Sophia directly. I want to be honest with you about what this means. Once we formally integrate what you've given us, this process moves out of your control. I can't promise you outcomes. I can't promise you timelines. What I can tell you is that your interests, including your father's financial position, will be considered in how we structure the next phase. Considered, Sophia said. Actively, Voss said. You have my word on that specifically. Sophia looked at her. She had spent the past 6 weeks learning to read rooms with a new kind of precision. The rooms Nathan had operated in the rooms of performance and social calculation and strategic charm, she had navigated those through instinct and good manners and the particular intelligence of someone who cared about the people around her. The rooms she had been in since Marchetti's were different. They required a different instrument entirely. They required the ability to distinguish between what someone said and what they meant, between what they offered and what they were actually willing to deliver. Renata Voss was telling the truth. Sophia could feel it in the same bone-level way she had always known when Nathan was not. All right, she said. Then we go forward. She called Damien from the car. It went well, she said before he could ask. I know, he said. Voss is thorough. If she's taking it in, she's serious about it. Sophia paused. You know her. We've been in the same room twice, he said. Years ago. Different circumstances. Circumstances I shouldn't ask about. Circumstances that resolved themselves appropriately, he said. She's one of the few people in that agency I trust to follow a thing where it actually leads. She looked out the car window at the city moving past. She had been inside that city for the entirety of her adult life, and it had never felt entirely like hers. It had always felt like Nathan's city. Nathan's world, the geography of his ambitions, and his network, and his version of success. 6 weeks ago, she had left a restaurant in this city, feeling more alone than she had ever felt anywhere. Right now, in the backs of a car, having just handed 7 years of careful documentation to a federal agent who had said the word actively with absolute clarity, she felt something that was not happiness exactly, but was the clean, solid predecessor to it. She said actively, Sophia told him. About my father's position. Good, Damien said. And the single word carried everything. He wasn't adding the relief, the satisfaction, the particular feeling of watching something that should have happened finally beginning to happen. I'm going to see him this weekend, she said. My father. You should. A pause. Do you want company? She thought about that. About Arthur Bennett on his back porch, the man who had invested in Nathan's company because Sophia had asked him to. The man who had covered her hand with his and said, Your mother would have said the same thing in exactly that order. She thought about what it would mean to bring Damien Moretti to that porch, to introduce those two worlds to each other. Not yet, she said, but soon. Whenever you're ready, he said. That was the thing about him she was learning. He said whenever you're ready, and he meant it without the particular undercurrent of impatience that the phrase usually carried from men who were waiting for you to catch up to a decision they had already made for you. He actually meant it. Nathan's attorney came back with a revised offer on Monday. It was better. Not complete. Nathan was still negotiating at the edges, still trying to preserve a version of the asset arrangement that left him with more than he deserved. But it was substantially better, and the movement told Sophia everything she needed to know about what had happened over the weekend. He had been told. Someone in the Hargrove network. Someone who had been briefed directly or indirectly on the federal meeting had communicated to Nathan that his position was considerably more precarious than he had calculated. She sat across from Claire in Claire's office and looked at the revised offer. "He's scared," Claire said. "Yes." "Do we accept?" "No," Sophia said. "We counter with the original terms, full reversal on my father's investment, full retraction on the professional reputation piece, not the qualified language they offered, full retraction. And I want a clause that indemnifies my father from any future civil liability connected to the company's activities during our marriage." Claire raised an eyebrow. "That last piece is non-negotiable," Sophia said. "If this investigation goes where it appears to be going, I want my father insulated from anything that reaches back into the company's history. Completely." Claire wrote it down. "Nathan will push back hard on that clause." "I know." Sophia picked up her coffee. "Let him." He did push back. He pushed back through 2 rounds of counteroffers over 4 days, and each counter told Sophia something about the state of his position. The indemnification clause was the one he fought hardest, which confirmed that he knew how far the investigation might reach, and he was trying to preserve some leverage by keeping her father's exposure as a negotiating chip. She refused to move on it. On the 5th day, Nathan's attorney requested a direct call between principals. Claire advised against it. Sophia agreed to it anyway. Nathan called at 9 in the morning. He sounded different from the man who had appeared at her apartment 3 weeks earlier. That Nathan had been frightened and raw, the specific rawness of someone whose constructed reality had just collapsed around him. This Nathan was controlled again, which was in some ways more concerning than frightened, because Nathan at his most controlled was Nathan operating on a plan. "I want this resolved," he said. "I think we both do." "We do," she said. "I told Claire what it takes to resolve it." "The indemnification clause is not realistic, Sophia. You're asking me to sign away." "I'm asking you to protect my father from the consequences of choices you made," she said. "He invested in your company because I asked him to, because I believed in you. Whatever is coming for your company, and Nathan, we both know what's coming, he should not be collateral damage to it." A silence. "What do you know about what's coming?" he said carefully. "I know enough," she said. "And so do the people who are now in possession of what I found." Another silence. Longer. "The indemnification," he said. "If I agree to that, I need something in return." "You're not in a position to negotiate terms," she said. "You're in a position to decide how much worse you want to make yours before this is over." She heard his breathing change. "You've changed," he said. "No," she said. "I've always been this. You just never looked." He agreed to the indemnification clause 2 hours later. The papers were signed on a Thursday afternoon. Claire called her as soon as it was finalized. Her voice was professionally restrained in the way of someone who was working very hard not to sound as satisfied as she felt. "It's done," she said. "Everything you asked for, signed, witnessed, filed." Sophia sat down. She had not expected the feeling that came with those 3 words. She had expected relief or triumph, or the clean finality of a long thing concluded. What she felt instead was something quieter and more profound, the specific emotion of a weight you have carried so long that you no longer notice it until the moment it is removed and you feel suddenly the extraordinary sensation of your own lightness. "Thank you, Claire," she said, "for everything." "Don't thank me yet," Claire said, and her voice carried a warmth that the professional register didn't fully conceal. "The investigation is ongoing. Nathan's situation is going to get considerably more public before it gets quieter." "I know. Your name will be in some of that coverage." "I know that too." She paused. "Let it be. I'm not hiding from any of it." She told her father that evening. She drove out to the house, the same 40-minute drive, the same smell of old books and her mother's tea and time when she walked through the back door. Arthur was at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a newspaper he had folded to the crossword, and he looked up when she came in, and she saw in his face the specific quality of a man who has been waiting. Not with impatience, but with the patient, loving anxiety of someone who trusts you completely, and is waiting for you to tell him it's all right to stop worrying. She sat across from him and told him everything. Not the technical details, those weren't what he needed. She told him the shape of it. The 7 weeks of work, the documentation, the federal meeting, the indemnification clause, the signed papers. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Your investment, the retirement piece." "Fully restored," she said. "In writing, with interest that Claire's team argued for and got." He looked down at his coffee cup. She watched his jaw move slightly, the particular movement of someone swallowing an emotion they have been holding for a long time. "Dad," she said. "I'm all right," he said. His voice was rough at the edges. "I'm very all right." He looked up. "I'm just thinking about what it took for you to do all of this. While everything else was, it wasn't separate from everything else," she said. "That's what I want you to understand. It wasn't me putting my own pain aside to fix yours. It was the same thing, rebuilding what he took, all of it at once." Arthur studied her. "This man," he said, "Moretti." She held her father's gaze. "He's important to this," Arthur said. "He was part of it, yes." She paused. "He's also, yes, he's important." Her father was quiet for a moment. She recognized the calculation happening behind his eyes. Not judgment exactly, but the careful consideration of a man weighing something with full seriousness. "Is he good to you?" he asked finally. She thought about that. About park benches and 28-minute response times, and "I don't want the foundation of whatever this is to be something I kept from you, and whenever you're ready." She thought about a man who had asked, "Are you all right?" with a consistency that had initially annoyed her and had ultimately become the most reliable thing in a very unreliable period of her life. "Yes," she said. "He's good to me." Arthur picked up his coffee cup, drank, set it down. "Then I'd like to meet him," he said simply. The story broke publicly on a Tuesday. It appeared first in a financial news outlet, the careful sourced kind of journalism that meant someone had been working it for months and had decided the documentation was solid enough to publish. By noon, it had been picked up by 3 major news organizations. By evening, it was the lead story in the city's business press. Nathan Caldwell, Hargrove Capital. A financial arrangement that had been running for 3 years through a subsidiary structure that was now being examined by federal investigators. Multiple sources. Documented. Named. Sophia's name appeared in the 3rd paragraph of the first story, according to sources familiar with the investigation. Documentation provided by Mr. Caldwell's former wife, Sophia Bennett, was instrumental in establishing the timeline of the arrangement. Diana called her within 6 minutes of the story going live. "It's out," Diana said. Her voice had the quality of someone who had been anticipating something for a long time and was still slightly stunned that the anticipation had resolved into reality. "I know. I've been watching it. Your name is in it. I know. How are you?" Sophia sat with the question for a moment. She was at her apartment, her own couch, the furniture she had chosen for herself, with her laptop open and her phone already lighting up with calls and messages from people she had known for years. People from Nathan's world, who were now recalibrating their understanding of what had happened at Marchetti's 6 weeks ago. "I'm fine," she said, and it was the complete truth. "Nathan issued a statement," Diana said. "His attorney released it 20 minutes ago. What does it say? That he's cooperating with investigators, that he takes full responsibility for decisions made within his company's financial structure." A pause. "He doesn't mention Hargrove by name." "He won't," Sophia said. "Not in a public statement. That's not how that works. He also says," Diana paused, "he says that his personal conduct during the dissolution of his marriage fell below the standard of decency he holds himself to, and that he acknowledges the harm caused." Sophia was quiet for a moment. It was not the statement she had asked for. It was not the full retraction. But it was something she had not expected, a public acknowledgement in his own name of the harm caused. She thought about what it had taken for Nathan Caldwell to put those words in a statement released to the press. She thought about his pride, the specific architectural pride of a man who had built his entire identity on being the person who made the right moves. Admitting harm publicly was not a move Nathan Caldwell made voluntarily. He had been advised to, or instructed to. She suspected Hargrove's damage control had a hand in it, making Nathan appear cooperative and remorseful, reduced his value as an ongoing story, and redirected focus toward the financial structure rather than the personal narrative. It didn't matter. The words were out. "Sophia," Diana said, "are you going to respond?" "No," she said. "Not today." "Why not?" "Because I don't need to." She paused. "The facts are public. The documentation is with federal investigators. My father is protected. The story is exactly what it is." She looked at the laptop screen at the article with her name in the third paragraph, at the version of the past 6 weeks being rendered in black and white for the city to read. "The best response I can give is just to be exactly who I am. That's enough." Diana was quiet for a moment. "I'm so proud of you," she said. It came out slightly thicker than her usual voice. "Don't make me cry," Sophia said. "I've been not crying for 6 weeks." "Then cry. You've earned it." She didn't cry then, but she came close. Damien arrived at her apartment that evening. She had left the door unlocked. She had told him to let himself in because she was on a call with Claire that went 20 minutes longer than expected, and by the time she hung up, he was already there. Jacket off, sitting on her couch, with 2 cups of coffee he had apparently made while she was finishing the call. She came out of the bedroom and stopped. "You made coffee," she said. "Your machine is more complicated than it should be." "I like it." "I know. It took me 4 minutes to figure out." He held 1 cup toward her. She took it, sat beside him on the couch, not across from him. Beside him, close enough that their shoulders were almost touching, and that closeness felt natural in a way she hadn't planned and didn't need to analyze. "It's out," she said. "I know. How does it look from your end?" "Clean," he said. "The story is structured around the documentary evidence. Your name is in it accurately. No embellishment, no implication beyond what's true. The Hargrove piece is going to expand over the next several weeks as the investigation becomes more visible." He paused. "Nathan's position is going to get considerably more difficult before this is resolved." "He made it difficult himself," she said. "Yes." She drank her coffee. Outside, the city was doing what it always did. Moving, indifferent, enormous, carrying 10 million private stories inside its noise. The story that had broken today was one of them. Tomorrow, there would be others. "My father wants to meet you," she said. Damien turned his head slightly toward her. "When?" he said. "This weekend if you're willing." "I'm willing." A pause. "I'll admit I'm more apprehensive about that than I was about the federal meeting." She looked at him. "Why?" "Because the federal meeting I knew how to prepare for." He held her gaze. "Your father's opinion of me matters to you. That makes it considerably more significant." She felt something shift in her chest, the particular warmth of being understood specifically, not generally. "He's going to ask you direct questions," she said. "He doesn't do subtext." "Good," Damien said. "Neither do I. He's going to ask you about your business." "I'll answer honestly. Your real business, Damien, not the version." "I know what you mean," he said, "and I'll answer honestly." He met her eyes directly. "Because if we are going to build something real, it starts with your father understanding what I am. Not a version of it, the actual thing." He paused. "He deserves that, and so do you." She looked at him for a moment. In the weeks since Marchetti's, she had been rebuilt by her own hands, not restored to what she had been, but constructed into something new. Something that had used the materials of her own intelligence and endurance, and the very specific anger of a woman who had been underestimated once too often. She was not the woman who had arranged that anniversary dinner. She was not the woman who had walked out of the restaurant into the cold and pressed her hand over her mouth on the sidewalk. She was not even sure she could describe exactly who she was now, because she was still mid-construction, still becoming. But she knew with the same bone-level certainty she had developed over the past 6 weeks, for distinguishing truth from performance, that the man beside her was real. Not perfect. Not without a history that would require navigation. Not uncomplicated. Real. "Damien," she said. "Yes." "I want to tell you something, and I need you to hear it the way I mean it." He turned toward her fully. The particular quality of his attention, the kind that gave you its full weight, settled over the conversation. "When I walked out of Marchetti's that night," she said, "I thought I was losing everything. I thought I had nothing, and nowhere, and no one who understood what I had actually been doing for 7 years, what it had cost, what it was worth." She paused. "I was wrong about that. I had everything I needed. I just needed room to use it." He held her gaze. "You gave me room," she said. "You didn't try to build it for me. You didn't stand in front of me. You stood beside you," he said quietly. "Yes," she breathed. "That's not nothing. That's actually everything." His hand found hers on the couch cushion between them. Not dramatically. Not with the weight of an announcement. Just his hand covering hers, warm and certain, and entirely without condition. They sat like that for a while in her apartment in the city that was telling their story in the morning papers and would move on to the next story by Thursday, as cities always did. She didn't need the city to hold the story. She was holding it herself. Nathan Caldwell's board removed him from his position as CEO 11 days after the story broke. The vote was 7-2. Gerald Marsh, the man who had come to Claire with documents and fear and a need for a way out, voted with the majority. The official statement cited the need to cooperate fully with federal investigators and to signal the company's commitment to transparency and ethical governance. The kind of corporate language that said everything by saying nothing and meant translated into plain truth. He was the cost they were willing to pay to preserve the rest. Sophia heard about it from Claire, who heard about it from a contact on the board. She had one single contained moment of something that might have been satisfaction. Then she moved on. Because there was something Sophia had come to understand over the weeks since the restaurant, Nathan's downfall was not her victory. Her victory was not about him at all. Her victory was the indemnification clause protecting her father. Her victory was the restored investment. Her victory was the documented retraction sitting in a legal file with her name on it. Her victory was the version of herself she had built in the wreckage of the 7 years he had used her. That was hers. He couldn't touch it. He never could have. She was at her laptop working 2 evenings later when she received an email. The address was unfamiliar. The subject line was empty. She opened it. "You made a mistake," it read. "This isn't over." She read it twice. Then she forwarded it to Claire, to Damien, and to Renata Voss's contact address, the one Voss had given her at the end of their meeting, with the particular quiet directness of a woman who anticipated needing to be reached again. Then she closed the email. Then she picked up her phone and called Damien. He answered on the second ring. "I got your forward," he said. "I already have someone tracing it." "It's from Hargrove," she said. It was not a question. Almost certainly. His voice was level, not alarmed, precisely focused. This is what cornered people do. They threaten because they no longer have better options. Is it credible? The threat or the danger behind it? Both. A pause. The threat is real in the sense that they're sending it. The danger is manageable because they know they are now fully aware that you are not an isolated target. You have federal investigators with your documentation. You have legal representation actively involved. You have... He paused. You have me. Another pause. This is pressure. It's not power. There's a difference. She looked at the closed email. She thought about the woman who had received the first anonymous text 6 weeks ago. "You should stop looking into things you don't understand," and had screenshotted it with shaking hands and forwarded it with the message, "It's bigger than we thought." She was not that woman anymore. She was not frightened. She was clear. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. "I mean, I hear you, and I'm not scared, and I'm going forward." She paused. I just wanted to make sure you knew about it. Another pause, longer than the others. You called me to make sure I knew, he said. Yes. Not because you needed me to handle it. No, because we're doing this together. She let that sit for a moment. That's what together means. She heard him exhale just barely. The specific exhale of a man who has kept himself carefully self-contained for a very long time and is slowly, deliberately choosing not to. Yes, he said. That's what it means. Outside her window, the city moved through its evening enormous and indifferent and absolutely full of people, carrying private stories toward uncertain destinations, hoping the destination would be worth the distance. She had walked into a restaurant 6 weeks ago holding roses and a handwritten card, and the hope that one evening could save 7 years. She had walked out of it holding nothing but herself. It turned out that was exactly enough. The trace on the email came back in 48 hours. Damien's team was thorough in the particular way of people who have been doing this kind of work long enough that thoroughness is not a choice, but a reflex. The email had been routed through 3 different servers across 2 countries, which was sophisticated enough to fool most people, and not quite sophisticated enough to fool the people Damien employed for exactly this kind of problem. It originated from a device registered to a mid-level Hargrove administrator named Paul Tesh. Not one of the principals. Not one of the names that appeared in the documents Sophia had given Voss. A man 3 levels down the organizational structure who had been tasked, she suspected, because he was expendable with sending a message designed to look like it came from nowhere. Voss had the information within 2 hours of Damien's team confirming it. She called Sophia directly. We're bringing Tesh in for questioning this afternoon, she said. I want you to know because his cooperation, if we get it, is going to accelerate the timeline on the broader investigation significantly. The principals at Hargrove are starting to understand that the walls are closing. When people at that level get scared, they make choices. She paused. Sometimes those choices are useful to us. And Nathan? Sophia asked. Mr. Caldwell has been cooperating, Voss said carefully. The degree of that cooperation will be reflected in how his situation is ultimately characterized. Another pause. He is not your problem anymore, Ms. Bennett. He is ours. Sophia sat with that sentence for a moment. He is not your problem anymore. She had spent 7 years making Nathan Caldwell her primary concern. His schedule, his clients, his reputation, his comfort, his carefully maintained image in a world that rewarded the performance of competence over its actual presence. She had organized her entire existence around the project of his success, and he had quietly, methodically structured his exit from that arrangement in a way designed to leave her with nothing. And now, 2 months later, he was someone else's problem. The simplicity of it was almost stunning. Thank you, she said to Voss, for calling personally. You gave us what we needed to move, Voss said. That deserved a personal call. She told Damien that evening. How was at her apartment again? This had become a natural pattern over the past weeks. The kind of pattern that establishes itself not through discussion, but through repetition and mutual comfort. The way real things tend to establish themselves. He was at the kitchen table with his laptop when she came in from a late meeting with Claire, and he looked up when she entered with the particular attention he always gave her arrival, as if her coming into a room was something worth noting. Voss called, she said. I know, she called me too. He closed his laptop. She told me you thanked her. She deserved it. She told me that specifically, he said. That you thanked her. Something moved in his expression, warm and brief. She seemed to find it notable. Is gratitude unusual in her line of work? More than you'd think. He paused. How are you feeling? You're asking me that again. I will keep asking until you stop having reasons to be asked. She sat across from him and thought about the question honestly, the way she had learned to think about his questions, not reaching for the automatic fine, not assembling a composed response, but actually checking. I feel like it's almost over, she said. And I don't know what to do with that. I've been moving for 2 months straight. Forward, always forward, because stopping felt like it would, I don't know, like it would let everything catch up. And if everything catches up, Then I have to feel it, she said. All of it. The 7 years, the restaurant, the card I never gave him. She paused. I'm not afraid of that. I just need to be ready. Damien looked at her steadily. You can be ready and still let it land, he said. Those aren't mutually exclusive. She held his gaze. I know, she said. You're right. He reached across the table. Not to take her hand, just placed his on the table between them available. An offering, not a demand. She put her hand over his. They stayed like that for a while without talking, which was one of the things she had come to understand about Damien Moretti, that no one who told stories about him would ever think to mention. He could be quiet with another person in a way that felt like presence rather than absence. He could sit in a room and say nothing and make the room feel more inhabited, not less. Nathan had always needed to fill silence. He had always been performing even in private, always composing the next thing, always looking past the current moment at the one he was building toward. Damien was here. Fully, completely here. She understood that this was not a small thing. She met with Gerald Marsh 10 days before the formal announcement of the federal charges. The meeting was not her idea. He had asked through his attorney whether she would be willing to speak with him. Claire had advised against it. Sophia had decided to go anyway because she understood that certain conversations needed to be had in person to be complete, and she had been conducting her life for the past 2 months on the principle that completion mattered. They met at a coffee shop, his choice, which she found oddly appropriate. Not a power setting, not a conference room or a private restaurant. A regular coffee shop, the kind with background noise and strangers at neighboring tables. The kind of place where a person can feel simultaneously anonymous and human. Marsh was 63 years old. He looked older than the last time she had seen him, which had been at a company dinner 2 years ago, where she had carefully arranged his seating to benefit Nathan's board relationship. He looked like a man who had spent considerable time in recent weeks confronting the distance between the person he had believed himself to be and the person his choices had revealed him to actually be. She recognized that particular exhaustion. Thank you for coming, he said when she sat. You asked, she said. And I found that the conversations I'm most reluctant to have are usually the ones I most need to. He looked at her for a moment. You've changed. People keep saying that to me. I mean it as a significant observation, he said, not a casual one. He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. I owe you an apology. I knew for some period of time that the company's financial structure was that certain arrangements existed that were not entirely that Nathan was involved in things that I chose not to examine carefully. He stopped. That's a very constructed way of saying I looked the other way. Yes, she said. It is. I'm sorry, he said directly, for the role my silence played in allowing someone who had done nothing wrong to be left exposed. She looked at him. She thought about what it cost a man like Gerald Marsh, a man who had built a 60-year identity on his own integrity and judgment, to say those words in a coffee shop to the woman his inaction had helped harm. I accept that, she said. And I want you to know something. She paused. Your decision to come forward, I know it wasn't comfortable. I know there were easier roads. The fact that you chose the difficult one matters. He looked at her with the expression of a man who had not expected to receive anything from this conversation. Your father, he said. Is he? He's fine, she said. Better than fine. She paused. He's protected. Completely. Marsh nodded, looked down at his cup. Nathan never understood what he had, he said quietly. In you. He spoke about you in meetings not often, but sometimes like you were infrastructure. Something that kept things running without requiring attention. He looked up. He was a fool. She didn't argue with that. Yes, she said simply. He was. The federal charges were announced on a Wednesday morning. 3 names. Nathan Caldwell was the second. The first was a Hargrove principal named Richard Solano, who had apparently decided that the most strategic response to the closing investigation was to make a single catastrophic and very public mistake. He had attempted to destroy physical records at a Hargrove-affiliated office 3 days before the announcement. The attempt had been observed, documented, and had added obstruction to a charge list that was already substantial. The third name was a city official whose connection to the Hargrove network had been the piece Voss's investigation had spent 14 months trying to establish and had finally locked down, using in part Sophia's contemporaneous meeting notes and the specific 11-word fragment that had sent her to Damien's Brooklyn brownstone on a night she still thought of as the pivot point of everything that came after. She watched the press conference on her laptop. Nathan appeared briefly on camera, not at the press conference, but in footage from outside the federal building afterward, walking beside his attorney with his head down and his hand raised toward the cameras in the gesture of a man who was trying to communicate through body language that he was cooperating and humble and not the story. Please focus elsewhere. She watched that footage for about 4 seconds. Then she closed the laptop. She had nothing more to feel about Nathan Caldwell. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Not even the distant sadness that had visited her occasionally in the first weeks the mourning not for the man he turned out to be, but for the man she had believed in for 7 years. That mourning had completed itself somewhere in the past 2 months. She had let it land the way Damien had said she could, and it had landed, and it had passed, and she was on the other side of it. She picked up her phone and called Diana. "I saw it," Diana said immediately. "I know. How do you feel?" "Like it's Wednesday," Sophia said. "Like I have a meeting with a client at 2 and I want to get lunch before that." She paused. "Like my life is mine, and this is just a thing that happened, and I am moving past it." Diana was quiet for a moment. "That," she said carefully, "is the healthiest thing you have ever said to me. Don't make it weird." "I'm not making it weird. I'm making it noted." A pause. "Lunch before your 2 o'clock. I'm coming." The client at 2 o'clock was new. Sophia had spent the past month quietly and methodically rebuilding the professional side of her life. She had spent 7 years making Nathan's company run, and the skills that had accomplished that, the organizational intelligence, the relationship management, the ability to see the whole system, rather than just the visible parts, did not belong to him. They had always belonged to her. He had just been the beneficiary. She was now the beneficiary. She had incorporated a consulting firm 4 weeks earlier. Claire had handled the paperwork. The firm's first 3 clients had come through professional relationships she had maintained independently throughout her marriage. People who had worked with Sophia, not just with Nathan's company, and who had not required much convincing that her capabilities were entirely her own. The client at 2 was a referral from one of those 3. A mid-sized manufacturing company whose operational structure had grown faster than the management system supporting it, creating the particular kind of productive chaos that consumed enormous energy and produced unnecessary waste. It was exactly the kind of problem she was good at. She sat across from the company's founder, a straightforward, no-nonsense woman in her 50s named Patricia, and spent an hour asking questions and listening to answers and watching the shape of the problem emerge from the conversation. At the end of the hour, Patricia leaned back and said, "You're exactly what I was told you were." "What were you told?" "That you're the person who actually keeps things running." Patricia smiled. "That you understand systems the way other people understand people." A pause. "I was also told you just came out of a rather public situation." Sophia met her eyes. "I did." "Does that affect your availability?" "It affects my name recognition," Sophia said. "Not my availability, not my capability." She paused. "My name being in the news is connected to documenting financial misconduct that's now being addressed by federal investigators. I'm not certain that's a liability for a company looking to improve its operational integrity." Patricia considered that for a moment. Then she extended her hand across the table. "Let's get started," she said. She and Damien drove out to see her father on a Saturday in late autumn. She had not been especially anxious about it. She had found over the past months that the things she used to approach with careful anxiety, confrontations, difficult conversations, the presentation of true things to people whose reactions mattered, she now approached with a directness that was almost simple. She had done too many hard things in too compressed a period to assign undue weight to individual difficult moments. But sitting in the car on the drive out, she became aware that Damien was quiet in a slightly different way than usual. "You're nervous," she said. He didn't deny it. I'm focused. That's a more dignified word for nervous. Something shifted in his profile. The almost smile she had learned to catch. Your father is going to ask me questions I need to answer honestly. I take that seriously. I know you do. I also, he paused. I want him to trust me, not to approve of me, not to like me. Trust me. Another pause. Because I am aware that trust for your father connects directly to trust in his own judgment, which connects to his assessment of what happened with Nathan, which... Damien. She put her hand on his arm briefly. He's going to trust you, because I trust you, and he trusts me. He was quiet for a moment. That's simple, he said. He's a direct man, she said. Direct people tend to move simply when the facts are clear. And what are the facts? She looked at him. That you were honest with me when it would have been easier not to be. That you stood beside me instead of in front of me. That you asked me to marry you. She stopped. He had not asked her to marry him. They had not had that conversation. She felt the color move into her face, not from embarrassment exactly, but from the specific self-exposure of a sentence that reveals something you hadn't consciously known you were thinking. Damien said nothing for a moment, then very carefully, that I asked you to marry you. I misspoke. Did you? She looked out the windshield. The sentence got away from me, she said. Sophia. His voice was quiet. Look at me. She looked at him. His expression was serious, not heavy, not weighted with the performative gravity that serious moments sometimes attracted. Just honest. The way he always was when something mattered. Is that what you want? He asked. She held his gaze. She thought about everything the word marriage had meant to her 7 years ago, when she had walked into it with Nathan, believing in the architecture of it. The permanence, the shared project of two people choosing each other every day. She thought about what the word had come to mean over 7 years of slow, quiet dismantling. She thought about what it meant right now in this car with this man. It is if you're asking, she said. I was quiet for a moment, that stretched long enough that she thought she had miscalculated something fundamental, and then he said very simply, I'm asking. She breathed. Then yes, she said. He reached over and took her hand from her lap and held it against his, and they drove the rest of the way to her father's house, like that. His hand over hers, the city falling away behind them. The particular silence of two people who have just said something permanent and are sitting inside the weight of it without needing to fill it with anything else. Arthur Bennett was on the back porch. He stood when Damien got out of the car, and the two men looked at each other across the distance of the yard. Her father upright and deliberate, the posture of a man who had built things carefully all his life. And Damien still and contained, carrying the particular gravity of someone who knew his own history and had chosen to be honest about it. She watched them shake hands. She watched her father look at Damien, the way he looked at everything that mattered completely directly, without the social scaffolding that most people erected between their true assessment and their visible reaction. Mr. Moretti, her father said. Mr. Bennett. Damien held his gaze. It's an honor. Come sit, her father said. I have questions. I expected that, Damien said. I'll answer all of them. Arthur looked at him for one more moment. Then he glanced at Sophia with an expression she had known her entire life, the particular look that meant he had already made a preliminary judgment and was giving her his honest reaction. He nodded. Just that. One nod. She breathed. Her father's questions were exactly as direct as she had promised. He asked about Damien's business, not the surface version, not the legitimate companies and the public profile, but the actual shape of what Damien's family had built and what Damien himself had chosen to do with that inheritance. Damien answered without deflection. He described the reality of it, the network, the history, the ongoing process of restructuring certain elements toward legitimacy and away from the arrangements his father had built. He did not minimize it. He did not perform remorse for things he had done while believing them necessary. He spoke about it the way he spoke about everything, as a man who was at peace with his truth and not interested in managing other people's reactions to it. Her father listened without interrupting. When Damien finished, Arthur was quiet for a moment. "You're not what I expected," he said. "What did you expect? Someone who would try to convince me he was something he's not." Arthur looked at him steadily. "I've had enough of those." He paused. "My daughter made good choices under extraordinary pressure over the past 2 months. She made those choices in an environment that included you. I take that as evidence. She made those choices entirely herself," Damien said. "I provided room. She did the work." Arthur looked at his daughter. She said nothing. There was nothing to add. "She told me," her father said, turning back to Damien, "that you stand beside her, not in front." "Yes, sir." "That's not as common as it should be." "No," Damien said. "It's not." Arthur Bennett picked up his coffee cup, looked at the yard for a moment, set it down. "She also told me," he said carefully, "that she trusts you." He met Damien's eyes. "My daughter's trust is not a common thing either. She gives it precisely, and she has given it accurately her entire life, with one significant exception." A pause. "I trust her judgment." Damien held his gaze. "Thank you," he said. And the two words were not a social formula. They were the genuine article. Arthur nodded. Then he looked at his daughter with the particular expression she had been seeing her whole life, the one that meant he was proud of her in a way that didn't require saying, because it was simply the permanent background condition of how he looked at her. "Are you happy?" he asked her. Not as a pleasantry, as an actual question requiring an actual answer. She looked at the man beside her. She looked at her father. She thought about the past 2 months, the movement and the fear and the work and the building and the particular revelation of discovering that the most devastating night of her life had been in ways she could not have imagined, standing on the sidewalk outside Marchetti's the night she was freed. "Yes," she said. "I am." He smiled. 3 months after the federal charges were announced, Sophia received a phone call from a journalist writing a long-form piece on the Hargrove investigation. The journalist, a woman with a careful, unhurried voice, asked if Sophia would be willing to speak on the record about her role in bringing the documentation forward. Sophia thought about it for exactly the length of time it took her to understand her own answer. "Yes," she said. "I'll speak." She told the journalist the truth. All of it. The 7 years. The anniversary dinner. The external hard drive, and the meeting notes written out of habit, out of the instinct of a woman who understood that careful documentation was a form of respect for the truth. The discovery of the 11 words, the federal meeting, the indemnification clause. The journalist listened without interrupting, which Sophia noted and appreciated. When Sophia finished, the journalist said, "Can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask." "Do you have any regret about the marriage, about the 7 years?" Sophia considered that with the full seriousness it deserved. "I regret the years I spent believing patience was the same as love," she said. "I regret the version of myself that made herself smaller to make someone else feel larger." She paused. "I don't regret being the person who documented everything. I don't regret being the person who walked out of that restaurant. And I don't regret a single thing about the 2 months that followed." "Why not?" "Because I was the most myself during those 2 months that I had been in 7 years, she said. "Possibly ever." She paused. "You find out who you actually are when things fall apart. And I found out I was someone a great deal stronger than I had been allowed to be." The journalist was quiet for a moment. "One more question," she said. "Nathan Caldwell is facing significant federal consequences. His company is under receivership. His reputation is significantly altered." A pause. "Do you feel that justice has been served?" Sophia thought about Nathan, about the man she had believed in, the man she had married, the man who had spent 4 months building an exit designed to leave her with nothing. She thought about the charcoal suit and the confident smile and his hand on the small of Victoria Lane's back in a restaurant Sophia had reserved for their anniversary. She thought about walking out. She thought about the cold air on the sidewalk. She thought about everything that had come after. "Justice is a complicated word," she said. "What I believe is that Nathan's consequences are the direct result of his own choices. I didn't do that to him. He did that to himself." She paused. "My concern was never with his consequences. My concern was with my father, my own standing, and the truth being part of the public record. She paused again. All of those things have been addressed, so yes, I believe the right things have been put right. Thank you, the journalist said. Thank you for asking the real questions, Sophia said. The piece ran 6 weeks later. It was long, the kind of long-form journalism that required an entire weekend to read properly. It told the story of the Hargrove investigation from multiple angles, following the money through the network, mapping the connections, charting the fall of Richard Solano and the city official and 3 mid-level administrators and Nathan Caldwell. Sophia's section was near the end. The journalist had written it carefully and honestly. The external hard drive, the meeting notes, the 11 words, the federal meeting. The story of a woman who had spent 7 years building something for someone else and had, in the wreckage of its collapse, discovered that everything she had built was actually hers. She read it once in the morning with her coffee. Then she set it aside. Diana called within the hour. The comment section, Diana said. Do not read the comment section. I wasn't going to. People are there calling you extraordinary, complete strangers. Sophia, there are women writing about their own... Diana's voice caught slightly. About their own marriages, their own situations, about watching you and... Diana, Sophia said gently. I know you don't need. It's not that I don't need it, Sophia said. It's that it doesn't change anything. The work was what it was before anyone read about it. She paused. But I'm glad if it means something to someone. Damien proposed properly on a Sunday evening, not with elaborate staging, not with the performed grandeur that the gesture was sometimes burdened with in other hands. He had made dinner at the brownstone he cooked with the same quiet deliberateness he brought to everything, and she had learned in recent months that this was one of the things she loved about him, that he applied his full attention to small domestic things as readily as he applied it to significant ones. After dinner, he had taken a small box from the kitchen counter and placed it on the table between them, without ceremony, and looked at her and said, "We said yes in the car. I wanted to do this properly." She opened the box. The ring was not what she expected. It was not a diamond, not the traditional architecture of the thing. It was a sapphire deep blue, set simply the kind of piece that belonged to a specific person, rather than to a category. It reminded me of the dress you wore the night I first saw you, he said, at Marchetti's. She looked at him. Navy blue. The dress Nathan had once said she looked stunning in. The dress she had worn that night as an act of hope. It had been an act of hope. It had just been hope for the wrong thing. She had been wearing it when the right thing began. She took the ring out of the box and put it on her own finger, because that was the kind of woman she was. She did not wait for things to be done for her when she was capable of doing them herself. Then she looked at him across the table. "It's perfect," she said. "I know," he said, not with arrogance, with the particular certainty of a man who has paid close enough attention to know when he has gotten something exactly right. She went back to Marchetti's on a night in early winter, not for any particular occasion, not to mark anything formally or close a loop in the theatrical way that certain moments seem to require. She went because Damien suggested it, a quiet dinner, a good meal, the kind of evening that belonged to them and not to the story that had begun there. The maitre d' recognized her. He showed them to a table near the window, not the specific table. From that night she had not requested it, and was glad he had not offered, but near enough that she could see the room the way she had seen it that night. She sat. She did not look for ghosts. She did not revisit the woman who had sat here before in her navy dress, with her handwritten card, and her carefully selected wine, and her fragile, exhausted hope. She acknowledged that woman, the way you acknowledge something that shaped you, with honesty and without apology, and without the need to linger. Damien sat across from her. Not beside her this time. Across from her. The way two people sit when they are meeting each other eye to eye, when the table between them is not a barrier, but a shared space, when the person on the other side is there because they chose to be, and will continue to choose to be, and is honest enough to say so. "You're quiet," he said. "I'm thinking." About... She looked around the room. At the people at the other tables, couples friends, a small family near the back, A woman alone with a book who appeared entirely content with her solitude. The ordinary and extraordinary chaos of other people's lives proceeding in all directions simultaneously. About the fact that this is where it started, she said. All of it. She looked at him. I walked into this restaurant 7 years ago believing in something that wasn't real. And then I walked into it again on what was supposed to be my anniversary, and the thing that wasn't real finally showed me its actual face. She paused. And now I'm here. With you. And my father's protected, and the truth is in the public record, and I have a company, and a ring on my finger, and I am the most myself I have ever been. She held his gaze. I just want to sit in that for a moment. Damien looked at her steadily. Then sit in it, he said. She did. She sat in the full, complete, astonishing fact of it, that the night she had walked out of this restaurant with nothing but herself had been the night she had walked finally and permanently toward everything. The wine list arrived. She looked at it. Do they carry Chateau Palmer? She asked the server. He checked. They did. She ordered it. When it arrived, she poured 2 glasses, and she looked at Damien across the table with his glass in his hand, and she thought about the bottle she had found at the end of a 2-week search from 2 different merchants, the bottle she had left on the table beside her wedding ring on the worst night of her life. She lifted her glass. To accurate arrivals, she said. His expression held everything. Warmth and understanding, and the deep specific regard of a man who loved a woman precisely and without reservation. To accurate arrivals, he said. They drank. And Sophia Moretti, the name she had chosen freely, the name that belonged to her because she had earned it, and not because she had been assigned it, sat in the restaurant where everything had broken open and felt completely and without qualification that she had arrived exactly where she was always supposed to be, not rescued, not restored, not returned to something she had lost, built, from the foundation up, on her own terms, with her own hands, and nothing. Not Nathan's choices, not the Hargrove network, not 7 years of being invisible in her own life had been able to take from her the one thing that had never actually been at risk. The woman she was, the woman she had always been, the woman it turned out she had been becoming all along.